Here's my word. Get the hell off my spread. Now.
For over 3 decades, a mansion in Newport Beach concealed the deepest secrets of John Wayne. When he passed in 1979, the house was locked. Every letter, photograph, and possession sealed away. No one knew what was inside until 2011, when the doors were finally opened. What they found was nothing short of shocking. A hidden will that tore his family apart, long-lost movie memorabilia worth millions, and personal revelations that changed everything we thought we knew about the Duke. Behind the Hollywood legend was a man with secrets, some buried so deep they remained hidden for decades. This is the untold story of John Wayne's fortune, the family drama that erupted after his death, and the truth locked away inside his mansion. John Wayne's journey didn't begin in Hollywood. It started in a small town in Iowa. Born as Marion Robert Morrison on May 26, 1907, in Winterset, he was a 13-pound newborn, so large that the local newspaper found it newsworthy. But his size wasn't the only thing that set him apart. At just 3 years old, he had a brush with death, falling into an icy creek. If not for a passing stranger who pulled him out, his story might have ended there. That moment of survival foreshadowed a lifetime of resilience, a trait that would define both the man and the legend he became. His childhood wasn't easy. When his father's business failed, the Morrison family left Iowa behind, heading west to California in search of a fresh start. They settled in Glendale, where young Marion quickly earned a new identity. The local firefighters would see him walking everywhere with his Airedale Terrier, Duke, and soon started calling them Big Duke and Little Duke. The name stuck. From that moment on, he refused to answer to anything else. Marion Morrison was gone, and Duke was born. Growing up in California, Duke had one dream: football. He was strong, fast, and determined, earning a scholarship to the University of Southern California in 1925. He joined the USC Trojans as an offensive lineman and had ambitions of making it big. But fate had other plans. A single body surfing accident shattered everything. One bad wave, a sudden crash onto the sand, and his shoulder was permanently injured. With that injury, his scholarship disappeared, along with his dreams of playing football professionally. Duke found himself lost. Without football, without financial support, and without a clear future, he took any job he could find. That's when Hollywood came calling, not as a star, but as a low-paid prop man at Fox Studios. It was 1927, and he was making just $35 a week, barely scraping by. The work was unglamorous, moving furniture, setting up props, and running errands for film crews. But it gave him a front-row seat to the world of movies. He watched, he learned, and slowly he started getting noticed. His first time on screen wasn't in a starring role. It wasn't even credited. He was just a background football player in Brown of Harvard, 1926, barely visible on screen. But that tiny taste of acting sparked something in him. He wanted more. Over the next decade, he clawed his way up through Hollywood's lowest ranks. Between 1930 and 1939, he starred in more than 80 low-budget westerns, most of them forgettable, filmed in just a couple of days. The work was exhausting. He was making movie after movie, but his paychecks remained small, and his name remained unknown. Some days, he barely had enough money to eat. A can of beans heated on a hot plate in his cheap apartment became his most common meal. By 1938, he was seriously considering giving up. Hollywood had chewed him up and spit him out. His dreams were slipping away. Then came the moment that changed everything. Director John Ford had been watching Duke's struggles. Ford saw something in him, a natural presence, a ruggedness that couldn't be taught. But the studios weren't convinced. To them, he was just another failed actor. Ford knew he needed a big role to prove himself. That opportunity came with Stagecoach, 1939. The problem? The studio wanted a big name, someone like Gary Cooper. Casting an unknown actor in a major role was risky. Ford didn't care. He fought for Duke, insisting he was the only man for the job. When the studio pushed back, Ford pushed harder, even threatening to walk away from the film. Eventually, he won. Marion Morrison had once again transformed, this time into John Wayne. From the moment Wayne stepped into the role of the Ringo Kid, the world saw something special. His first scene in Stagecoach became legendary, a dramatic close-up as he spun his rifle, the camera zooming in on his confident smirk. It lasted just a few seconds, but it took 27 takes to get it right. Wayne was so nervous that he kept getting it wrong. But when he finally nailed it, that moment turned him into a star. Stagecoach wasn't just a hit. It was a sensation. It earned 7 Academy Award nominations and introduced audiences to the man who would redefine the Western genre. But despite his breakout success, Wayne was still treated like a second-tier actor. He was paid just $3,700 for the film, a fraction of what Hollywood's elite were making. Even so, there was no turning back. John Wayne was no longer an unknown extra struggling to pay his rent. He had arrived. With his rise to fame came an unlikely partnership that would shape his career: his collaboration with John Ford. Together, they created some of the greatest films in cinema history. Over the next 50 years, they made 14 movies, forever changing Hollywood's idea of the Western hero. But it wasn't always easy. Ford was known for being harsh, and he treated Wayne worse than most. On the set of The Searchers, 1956, Ford humiliated Wayne in front of the entire crew, making him redo a simple scene, just picking up a gun, 17 times. Wayne took it without complaint. He knew Ford's methods, however brutal, pushed him to be his best. That toughness, both on and off screen, defined Wayne's image. He became the ultimate symbol of American masculinity, turning down roles in films like The Maltese Falcon and High Noon because they didn't fit his persona. He refused to play villains, refused to show weakness, and refused to compromise. To the world, he was more than an actor. He was the embodiment of the cowboy spirit. By the 1950s and 60s, John Wayne wasn't just making movies. He was shaping American culture. His films like The Alamo and True Grit weren't just blockbusters, they were statements. His characters weren't just cowboys, they were larger-than-life heroes. And for millions of fans, he wasn't just an actor, he was a legend. But behind the fame, behind the iconic image, there was another story, one filled with personal struggles, hidden conflicts, and secrets that would only come to light after his death. John Wayne wasn't just a legend on screen. His personal life was just as dramatic as the roles he played. Behind the rugged, all-American image, his love life was filled with passion, betrayal, and explosive conflicts. 3 marriages, multiple affairs, and a romance that nearly ended in gunfire. It was a life as unpredictable as the Wild West he so often portrayed. His first marriage was to Josephine Saenz, a quiet, deeply religious woman from a wealthy family. They married in 1933, when Wayne was still trying to make a name for himself in Hollywood. At first, it seemed like the perfect match. They had 4 children together, and Josephine stood by him through years of struggle. But as Wayne's fame grew, so did the distance between them. Hollywood demanded long hours, and Wayne was rarely home. His on-screen persona as a tough, independent cowboy became his real-life identity. He lived for the work, for the fame, and for the adventure. Josephine, on the other hand, wanted stability. A family man who would be home for dinner. By the late 1940s, their marriage was falling apart. The final blow came when Josephine discovered Wayne's affair with Marlene Dietrich. The legendary German actress was one of the most glamorous women in Hollywood, and Wayne fell for her hard. Their affair lasted nearly a decade, full of passion, secrecy, and intense devotion. Dietrich was unlike anyone he had ever been with, bold, fearless, and completely intoxicating. But she wasn't interested in marriage, and Wayne wasn't about to leave Hollywood behind for her. In 1945, his marriage to Josephine officially ended. Not long after, he married his second wife, Esperanza Bauer, a fiery Mexican actress with a dangerous temper. Their relationship was nothing short of chaos. Esperanza was deeply jealous of Wayne's co-stars, convinced he was constantly having affairs. Her jealousy turned violent one night when Wayne returned home late from a party. Esperanza, drunk and enraged, grabbed a gun and aimed it at him as he walked through the door. She pulled the trigger, but the shot missed. Wayne left the house that night and never looked back. By 1954, they were divorced. His third and final marriage was to Pilar Palet, a Peruvian actress nearly 20 years younger than him. They married in 1954 and had 3 children together. For a time, it seemed like Wayne had finally found lasting love. But once again, his career took priority. By 1973, their marriage was effectively over. Though they never divorced, they lived separate lives, and Wayne moved in with his secretary, Pat Stacy, who became his final companion. Rumors of other affairs followed Wayne throughout his life. His chemistry with Maureen O'Hara, his frequent co-star, was undeniable. Fans speculated for years that their on-screen romance extended beyond the cameras. O'Hara herself never confirmed it, but her grandson later suggested that there was something real between them, something passionate but impossible to sustain. Wayne's personal life may have been turbulent, but there was one thing he was certain about: his dream of making the Alamo. For over 15 years, he obsessed over bringing the historic battle to the big screen. He didn't just want to star in it, he wanted complete control. But when studios hesitated, Wayne did the unthinkable. He mortgaged nearly everything he owned to fund the film himself. The budget ballooned to $12 million, an unheard-of amount in 1960. Wayne insisted on authenticity, building a full-scale replica of the Alamo in Texas, brick by brick. Over 1.5 million adobe bricks were used, and the set was so massive it became a tourist attraction for years. The film required thousands of extras, hundreds of horses, and a grueling 79-day shoot in blistering heat. Despite Wayne's passion, the Alamo failed at the box office. While it earned several Oscar nominations, critics were divided, and the film struggled to make back its enormous budget. Wayne was devastated. He had gambled everything, and the loss left him in serious financial trouble. For the first time in years, the invincible cowboy looked vulnerable. But even financial ruin couldn't slow him down. In 1964, Wayne faced an even greater battle: cancer. A lifetime of smoking up to 6 packs a day had caught up with him. Doctors discovered a malignant tumor in his lung and told him he had a 50% chance of survival. Most actors would have hidden their diagnosis, afraid of looking weak. But not Wayne. He went public, encouraging fans to get screened, even giving cancer a nickname, the Big C, to make it less frightening. Surgeons removed his entire left lung and 2 ribs, leaving him in constant pain. Yet, just 5 months later, he was back on set, refusing to let illness dictate his life. He continued acting, continued working, continued being John Wayne. But cancer wasn't finished with him. In 1979, he was diagnosed again, this time with stomach cancer. He kept it a secret, unwilling to let the public see him fade. His last film, The Shootist, 1976, was painfully close to reality. He played an aging gunfighter dying of cancer, a role that felt more like a farewell than fiction. He was weak, needing oxygen between scenes, but he refused to let anyone see him struggle. In one particularly grueling moment, his horse stumbled, nearly throwing him off. He tore a muscle in his shoulder, but finished the scene without complaint. Wayne's battle with cancer was one he couldn't win. On June 11, 1979, he passed away at UCLA Medical Center at the age of 72. The news shook Hollywood and his millions of fans around the world. President Jimmy Carter called him a symbol of American courage. Thousands of people gathered outside the hospital and his home, leaving flowers, cowboy hats, and handwritten letters. But the real shock came after his death, not from the public, but from his will. Despite decades of success, his estate was shockingly small. At the time of his death, John Wayne's fortune was estimated at just $6.85 million, around $25 million today. Compared to other Hollywood legends, this was far less than expected. He had been one of the highest-paid actors in history, yet much of his wealth seemed to have vanished. Then came the biggest surprise. He left nothing to Pilar, his third wife. They had never officially divorced, yet she was completely cut out of his will. Instead, nearly everything was divided among his 7 children from his first 2 marriages. The omission of Pilar sparked years of speculation. Had Wayne intentionally written her out? Had his fortune been drained by bad investments? Or had something more secretive happened to his wealth? Adding to the mystery was the sudden sale of his beloved yacht, Wild Goose, shortly before his death. Once a World War II minesweeper, the yacht had been Wayne's sanctuary. He spent countless days on it, hosting friends, relaxing on the water, escaping Hollywood. Yet, just before his passing, it was quietly sold for $750,000. Wayne's financial decisions, the missing assets, and the tension within his family left unanswered questions. What really happened to his fortune? And why had he chosen to leave out the woman who had stood by him for decades? His final years were filled with battles. Some he won, some he lost. But in the end, John Wayne remained the same man he had always been. Strong, stubborn, and determined to ride off into the sunset on his own terms. For over 30 years, John Wayne's Newport Beach mansion sat untouched, locked away from the world. After his death in 1979, the estate was sealed, his belongings stored away, never to be seen again. But in 2011, everything changed. The doors were finally opened, revealing a time capsule of secrets, treasures, and mysteries that had been hidden for decades. Inside, over 700 personal items were uncovered, each offering a rare glimpse into the private life of one of Hollywood's most legendary figures. Among the discoveries were stacks of personal letters, handwritten notes on scripts, and never-before-seen photographs. Intimate moments frozen in time, capturing Wayne not as the movie star, but as the man behind the legend. One of the most shocking finds was his last driver's license, a simple piece of plastic that seemed insignificant but became a collector's dream. When it went up for auction, it sold for a staggering $89,500, proof that even the smallest relic of Wayne's life held immense value. Then there was the sealed letter. Found among his personal effects, its contents were never made public. What was inside? A final confession? A lost piece of his legacy? No one knows. The letter remains a mystery, its words forever locked away. But for all the admiration Wayne received, there was another side of his legacy that resurfaced decades later, one that sparked outrage, controversy, and calls for his name to be erased from history. In 1971, Wayne sat down for an interview with Playboy magazine. At the time, it barely made waves. But in 2019, a single tweet changed everything. Someone had rediscovered the interview, and its contents were shocking. Wayne had made deeply racist and offensive statements, comments about Black people, Native Americans, and LGBTQ+ individuals that stunned modern audiences. He stated that he believed in white supremacy until, in his words, Black people were educated to a point of responsibility. He justified the brutal treatment of Native Americans, arguing that they had been rightfully displaced. And when speaking about LGBTQ+ individuals, he used slurs, dismissing their place in society. When the interview resurfaced, social media exploded. People who had grown up idolizing Wayne were forced to confront a side of him they had never known. Was he just a man of his time, or was this something more? The backlash was immediate. Wayne's name, once synonymous with American heroism, was now linked to controversy. For some, this interview destroyed his legacy, proving that the man behind the cowboy hat was far from the icon he had been painted to be. Others argued that his views, though offensive, were part of a different era. Wrong, but not unexpected. But the debate didn't end online. It moved into real-world institutions that had long honored Wayne's name. One of the biggest targets was John Wayne Airport in Orange County, California. Named after him in 1979, it had stood as a tribute to his legacy for decades. But in 2020, amid nationwide protests against racism and injustice, activists demanded change. The Orange County Democratic Party called for the airport to be renamed, stating that Wayne's views did not align with modern values. His name, once a point of pride, had become a symbol of controversy. Supporters fought back, arguing that his career and contributions outweighed his personal beliefs. His son, Ethan Wayne, defended him publicly, claiming that his father had been misunderstood and that his words were being unfairly used against him. To this day, the airport still bears his name, but the debate has never fully settled. The question remains, should we judge a historical figure by the standards of today, or should we separate the art from the artist? Wayne's legacy took another hit in 2020 when the University of Southern California, where he had once studied, made a bold decision. For years, the School of Cinematic Arts had displayed an exhibit honoring Wayne, filled with memorabilia and film posters showcasing his legendary career. But as conversations about race and representation intensified, students and faculty pushed for its removal. USC ultimately decided to take the exhibit down, stating that they wanted to create a more inclusive space. Critics saw this as an erasure of history, while supporters argued that Wayne's legacy no longer represented the values the school wanted to uphold. This moment reignited an even bigger debate, one that extends far beyond Wayne himself. Can we separate an artist's work from their personal beliefs? Do the contributions of an actor, filmmaker, or public figure outweigh their flaws? Wayne's movies remain some of the most iconic in film history. These films helped shape American cinema. But for many, knowing the man behind them held such controversial views makes them harder to watch. The battle over John Wayne's legacy is far from over. Some still see him as the ultimate American hero, a man who represented strength, resilience, and patriotism. Others see him as a symbol of outdated values, a relic of a time when Hollywood ignored the voices of those who didn't fit the mold. His name still stands, his films still play, but the question lingers: how do we remember John Wayne? As a legend, or as a cautionary tale of how history can shift beneath our feet? John Wayne was more than just an actor. He was an institution, a symbol of rugged American individualism, the face of Hollywood's golden era. His presence shaped the Western genre. His films became legendary, and his name became synonymous with strength, courage, and unshakable determination. Decades after his death, his influence on cinema remains undeniable. But behind the cowboy hat and larger-than-life persona was a man whose legacy is far more complicated. The revelations that surfaced over the years, from his controversial statements to the family conflicts surrounding his estate, have left many questioning how he should be remembered. His words, preserved in a decades-old interview, revealed views that sparked outrage in a modern world, shifting the way people see him. The anger over his comments reignited debates about whether figures from the past should be judged by today's standards or remembered in the context of their time. To some, his statements are inexcusable, a sign that his legacy should be reevaluated. To others, his impact on film and American culture is too significant to be erased. The secrets locked away in his Newport Beach mansion for more than 30 years only added to the mystery. The sealed letters, lost memorabilia, and strange financial decisions paint the picture of a man who, despite his fame and fortune, remained elusive even in death. He was a Hollywood icon, but he was also human, flawed, complex. Ward Bond was one of Hollywood's most iconic yet underrated actors. His towering presence and reliable performances in over 200 films made him a staple of American cinema. But his off-screen life and complex friendships are just as remarkable. Today, we explore Ward Bond's fascinating life and career, and the unlikely yet lasting friendship he shared with John Wayne. Wardell Edwin Bond was born in 1903 in the small town of Benkelman, Nebraska. His early years were spent in Denver, Colorado, where a deep passion for sports, especially football, laid the foundation for his character. Growing up in a family that valued hard work and discipline, Bond quickly became known for his athletic prowess. His skill on the football field became his defining feature as he honed his abilities and looked toward a future in sports. However, it was his time at the University of Southern California, or USC, that set the stage for a turn in his destiny. It was here that he crossed paths with a fellow aspiring athlete, John Wayne, who would go on to become one of Hollywood's greatest legends. This encounter would mark the beginning of not only a lasting friendship, but a shared journey that would define both of their careers in ways neither could have predicted. At USC, the bond between the two young men formed over shared ambitions and mutual respect. Football was their common ground, but it was clear that they both had aspirations that extended far beyond the field. Wayne and Bond quickly became more than just teammates. They became friends, allies in the tough world of athletics, with both men dreaming of making it big in Hollywood. But despite their early promise in sports, Bond's future would veer into an unexpected direction. Although Bond's initial ambitions were rooted in athletics, his deepening relationship with Wayne and his exposure to the Hollywood scene in the late 1920s began to spark an interest in acting. The entertainment industry was a far cry from the football fields of USC, but Bond's athletic background would prove invaluable in shaping his future career. It wasn't long before Bond made the transition from the gridiron to the silver screen, where his imposing physical presence and commanding voice caught the attention of casting directors. His towering frame and rugged demeanor made him a natural fit for the types of roles that demanded strength and authority, characteristics that would become his hallmark as he moved further into Hollywood. The switch from sports to acting wasn't instantaneous, but it was a shift that would prove to be life-altering. Ward Bond's transformation from an athlete to a rising star in the entertainment industry started to take shape. The decision to pursue a career in acting set him on a path that would lead to an incredibly successful and long-lasting career in Hollywood. And, as fate would have it, his friendship with John Wayne would prove to be a cornerstone of that journey, with both men supporting each other in the tough and often unpredictable world of film. This period marked the beginning of an era for Ward Bond, one that would see him transition from a talented football player to one of Hollywood's most respected character actors, with his friendship with John Wayne serving as a key element in shaping his path to stardom. With his towering stature and commanding presence, Ward Bond quickly established himself as a natural fit for the world of cinema. His imposing frame and deep voice made him a standout on screen, and he soon became known for playing tough, reliable characters such as soldiers, sailors, and lawmen. His journey into acting began during the silent film era, when the industry was evolving, and Bond was right there at the crossroads of change. Early in his career, he began landing roles that showcased his strength and grit, qualities that would come to define his career. Bond's film debut came in 1929 with the movie Salute, where he found himself alongside his longtime friend, John Wayne. This film marked the beginning of a long partnership between the two men, both on screen and off. Although the role was small, it helped establish Bond as an actor to watch. Over the next few years, he would continue to work in smaller roles, but his towering presence ensured that he caught the eye of casting directors who understood the value of his rugged persona. As Hollywood evolved, so did Bond's career. The industry, shifting from silent films to talkies, created new opportunities for actors with a powerful voice and commanding presence. Bond capitalized on this change, earning roles in some of the most iconic films of the era. His reputation grew quickly as he collaborated with legendary directors such as John Ford and Frank Capra, two of the most influential filmmakers in Hollywood's golden age. Through these partnerships, Bond's talent was nurtured, and he became a staple in westerns, war films, and adventure pictures. His ability to portray strong, principled characters made him a favorite of these visionary directors. One of his most notable roles was in The Maltese Falcon, 1941, a film that would go on to become one of the greatest noir classics in cinema history. Bond played a supporting role, but his performance, as always, was delivered with authenticity and strength, complementing the darker themes of the film. Another one of his defining roles came in It's a Wonderful Life, 1946, a beloved Christmas classic where he portrayed a tough but caring character, adding emotional weight to the film's heartwarming narrative. Bond's ability to bring depth to seemingly simple roles made him a unique presence in Hollywood, and his films were often elevated by his performances. Perhaps even more so, Bond proved his versatility as an actor. He was not confined to any one genre, excelling in a variety of roles across westerns, war films, and film noir. His work in Sergeant York, 1941, helped to solidify his reputation in war films, where he played characters that embodied the very traits of loyalty, courage, and honor that he valued in real life. Meanwhile, his role in The Searchers, 1956, directed by John Ford, showcased his ability to move seamlessly between supporting roles and more prominent parts, solidifying his place as a trusted character actor who brought emotional gravitas to every scene. Bond's career was a testament to his flexibility as an actor. While he never became a matinee idol in the traditional sense, his characters, always dependable, rugged, and often deeply patriotic, resonated with audiences. Whether he was playing a sheriff in a Western or a soldier in a war epic, his roles were consistently grounded in authenticity. Bond's on-screen persona of strength and reliability made him a favorite of directors, and his remarkable ability to embody characters from various walks of life ensured that his career would flourish across multiple decades. From his early days in Hollywood to becoming a familiar face in some of the most iconic films in American cinema, Ward Bond's rise to prominence was marked by hard work, determination, and a willingness to evolve with the industry. By the time the 1940s arrived, Bond was firmly established as one of Hollywood's most respected character actors, known not just for his physical presence, but for the emotional weight he brought to every role he played. Among the many relationships that shaped Ward Bond's life and career, perhaps none was as significant as his decades-long friendship with John Wayne. Their connection was forged in the early days of Hollywood, a time when the film industry was still evolving and actors were carving out their places in a new and competitive landscape. What began as a bond between two football players at USC soon blossomed into a deep and lasting friendship that would transcend the roles they played on screen, becoming one of the most enduring friendships in Hollywood history. From the very start, their shared experiences on film sets, long, grueling location shoots, and the camaraderie of late-night conversations helped cement their bond. Hollywood in the 1930s and 40s was not for the faint-hearted. The shoots were often physically demanding and the hours long. But for Bond and Wayne, these challenges became the foundation of their friendship. Whether working together on a Western or a war film, they developed a shorthand, a mutual understanding of the demands of the job, and a shared sense of humor that saw them through the most trying days on set. Bond was not one to shy away from speaking his mind, and he had plenty of candid opinions about his friend, John Wayne. While their friendship was built on respect and a genuine connection, Bond was also brutally honest about the complexities of Wayne's character. In one of his most famous quotes, Bond described Wayne as the biggest jerk I ever loved. This remark encapsulates the dual nature of Wayne's personality. A man whose larger-than-life presence on screen was often at odds with the more difficult aspects of his behavior behind the scenes. John Wayne was the epitome of the American hero, a rugged, fearless cowboy who personified the virtues of courage, loyalty, and strength. On screen, he was the symbol of frontier justice, a man who stood tall in the face of adversity and always did the right thing. He was the kind of hero audiences admired, revered, and aspired to emulate. But behind the scenes, Wayne was a far more complicated figure. Bond, who saw both sides of Wayne, understood this better than anyone. Wayne could be kind, supportive, and fiercely loyal to his friends. He was known for going out of his way to help his colleagues, offering them roles in films, providing financial assistance when needed, and always being there when someone needed a friend. But, as Bond often remarked, Wayne also had a volatile temper and a tendency to steamroll over others when things didn't go his way. There were times when his confidence turned into arrogance, and his desire to maintain control over every situation led him to clash with directors, actors, and crew members. Bond witnessed these moments firsthand, And while he didn't shy away from criticizing Wayne's behavior, he always acknowledged the deeper bond between them. In their years working together, Bond saw both the good and the bad in Wayne. He knew the man behind the icon, and despite Wayne's flaws, he chose to stand by him. This friendship was not one of blind loyalty, but of a genuine understanding of each other's complexities. Bond accepted Wayne with all his contradictions, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Their relationship wasn't defined by perfection, but by the strength of their connection, which endured the ups and downs of their careers and personal lives. Through all their shared experiences, the long days on set, the late-night drinks, the conversations about life, love, and Hollywood, Bond came to understand Wayne in a way few others did. He saw the man beyond the image, recognizing the vulnerability that often lay behind Wayne's tough exterior. This duality of Wayne, the hero and the flawed man, made their friendship even more remarkable. It wasn't just a friendship based on admiration, but one built on mutual respect for each other's strengths, as well as an acknowledgement of each other's weaknesses. Even as Bond spoke candidly about the difficulties of dealing with Wayne's temper and his sometimes difficult personality, there was never any question about their loyalty to each other. Their bond was deeper than the public persona Wayne projected. It was based on years of shared history, mutual understanding, and a sense of loyalty that was unshakable, even in the face of Wayne's more troubling traits. In the end, their friendship was a testament to the complexities of human relationships. It was a bond that defied simple categorization, not just because of Wayne's fame, but because of the way they both saw each other. It was built not on the perfect image of heroism, but on the understanding of what it meant to be a flawed human being, striving for something greater in a world that wasn't always as clear-cut as the films they starred in. John Wayne's iconic status as a symbol of American strength and virtue is often overshadowed by the complexities of his personal life. While he became known as the embodiment of courage, patriotism, and the rugged individualist, those who were closest to him, like Ward Bond, understood that Wayne's real personality was far more complicated. Bond, in particular, was one of the few who didn't shy away from acknowledging Wayne's darker side, speaking candidly about the contradictions that defined his friend and colleague. Behind Wayne's famous on-screen persona, which captured the hearts of millions, lay a man full of flaws, contradictions, and insecurities. Bond, who had known him for decades, was quick to point out that Wayne's temper and arrogance often painted a different picture than the heroic, steadfast character he portrayed in films. On set, Wayne could be domineering, often asserting his control over every situation. His temperament, sometimes volatile, would flare up when things weren't going his way. Bond, who worked alongside Wayne in many of his films, witnessed firsthand how the Duke could lose his cool, belittling those who didn't meet his expectations or who questioned his authority. Despite these traits, Bond was unwavering in his loyalty to Wayne. He understood that behind the tough exterior and occasionally brash behavior was a man who was deeply insecure, sometimes hiding his vulnerability behind his arrogance. As complicated as Wayne was, Bond never let go of the bond they had forged, grounded in years of shared experiences, mutual respect, and understanding. Bond was able to accept Wayne's imperfections and see him for the whole person he was, acknowledging both the good and the bad. This unwavering loyalty, despite Wayne's flaws, was a testament to the depth of their friendship. Perhaps the most revealing aspect of Wayne's character was his infamous 1971 Playboy interview, which exposed his personal views on race, gender, and patriotism. Views that would later spark controversy, and divide public opinion. In the interview, Wayne expressed views that were not only deeply conservative, but also racially insensitive. His comments about race, in particular, ignited a firestorm of criticism, especially in an era that was increasingly focused on civil rights and equality. Wayne's declarations about his belief in the superiority of certain races, his support for a rigid definition of masculinity, and his staunch patriotism revealed a man whose views were rooted in a more traditional, often outdated perspective of American values. For many, this interview marked a turning point in how Wayne was perceived, particularly by younger generations who found his views offensive. His position on social issues became a point of contention that would follow him for the remainder of his life. Yet, despite the controversy surrounding the interview, Bond never wavered in his loyalty to Wayne. In fact, Bond often defended his friend, acknowledging his flaws but also emphasizing the man behind the public image. A man he respected, even if he didn't always agree with everything he stood for. This duality, the Duke as a larger-than-life hero on screen and a flawed, sometimes difficult man off-screen, is what made John Wayne such a polarizing figure. To some, his views on race and gender, as well as his political stances, were unforgivable. To others, including Ward Bond, Wayne's contributions to American cinema, his loyalty to his friends, and the qualities of leadership he exhibited made him a man worth defending. Bond's friendship with Wayne was built on the recognition that true loyalty isn't about perfection. It's about standing by someone despite their faults, understanding that every person is shaped by their experiences, and accepting them for who they are in their entirety. Bond's ability to accept Wayne's flaws speaks volumes about their friendship. Bond didn't view his friend through the lens of public opinion or the shifting tides of social issues. Instead, he saw Wayne as a man who, for all his imperfections, had qualities that were worth admiring. Their friendship, based on mutual respect and decades of shared history, allowed Bond to see the full picture of Wayne. Not just the hero, but the man who struggled with his own insecurities and, at times, misjudged his place in a changing world. While Ward Bond's professional life was filled with triumphs and accolades, his personal life was equally complex and captivating, albeit often overshadowed by his prolific career. Beneath the surface of the tough, dependable characters he portrayed on screen was a man whose personal relationships offered a different, more introspective side of his character. His two marriages, along with his quiet, more private relationship with his second wife, Louise Myers, marked a significant and more peaceful chapter in his life, away from the Hollywood spotlight. Bond's first marriage took place in 1936, when he wed Doris Sellers Childs. At the time, Bond was beginning to establish himself as a rising character actor in Hollywood. Sellers Childs, a private individual, was somewhat removed from the glitz and glamour of the entertainment industry, leading a life outside the public eye. Their marriage, which spanned 8 years, coincided with Bond's increasing success in Hollywood, as he became a familiar face in major films. However, like many Hollywood relationships, the pressures of his demanding career and frequent travel began to take a toll. In 1944, the couple decided to part ways, ending their marriage after years of strain. While the reasons for their divorce were never fully disclosed, it's clear that the challenges of balancing personal life with the rigorous demands of Hollywood played a significant role. Despite the end of his first marriage, Bond didn't let it define him. A decade later, in 1954, he married Louise Myers, a woman who would become his partner during one of the more stable and content periods of his life. By this time, Bond had already carved out a place for himself in television, particularly with his role as Major Seth Adams on the hit NBC series Wagon Train. Unlike his first marriage, which had occurred during a time of great professional uncertainty, his union with Louise came at a time when Bond was more established in his career and found a sense of balance between his professional commitments and personal life. Their marriage lasted until Bond's untimely death in 1960, and it was a source of stability and support during his final years. While Ward Bond was known for his strong and rugged on-screen personas, those who knew him personally would attest to his deep devotion to his family. His commitment to his wife, Louise, and the life they built together was evident even amid the constant pressures and demands of Hollywood. Bond was not simply a man of action on screen, but also a husband who took his personal relationships seriously. Despite the hectic nature of his career, he always made time for his family, understanding that their support was vital to his well-being. His second marriage to Louise represented a quieter, more settled period of his life. Their 6-year marriage was marked by mutual respect, companionship, and shared love for one another, away from the constant turmoil of the Hollywood limelight. Bond's dedication to his family, particularly to his wife, helped him navigate the challenges of fame and the emotional toll that came with his demanding work schedule. Though his career was marked by public triumphs, Bond's personal life with Louise, filled with moments of peace and stability, proved equally important in shaping who he was. His relationship with her was one of the few constants in his turbulent life, and it provided a grounding influence that allowed him to remain dedicated to his craft, while staying connected to his most cherished personal relationships. In a profession where personal lives often take a back seat to public personas, Ward Bond's dedication to his family is a testament to the balance he was able to achieve in a chaotic industry, providing a more nuanced view of the man behind the screen. Throughout his career, Ward Bond was never one to shy away from expressing his political beliefs, especially during the turbulent McCarthy era of the 1950s. Much like his close friend John Wayne, Bond was an outspoken advocate for a strong anti-communist stance. The Cold War era saw a divided America, and Hollywood was not immune to the political battles of the time. As fear of communism spread across the nation, Hollywood became a battleground, with some actors, directors, and writers coming under scrutiny for their alleged political affiliations. Bond, firmly entrenched in his conservative views, supported efforts to root out those he believed posed a threat to American ideals, including the Hollywood blacklist. Bond's alignment with the anti-communist movement was rooted in his belief in the preservation of American values and the idea that communism was a direct threat to the country's freedom and way of life. He was a dedicated member of the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, a group that sought to protect Hollywood from what they saw as the encroachment of communist ideology. The alliance, which included other right-leaning figures like John Wayne and Gary Cooper, was committed to exposing alleged communists within the film industry and preventing them from influencing the entertainment world. This period, often referred to as the Hollywood blacklist, was marked by political fervor and fear, and it led to some of the most controversial and divisive actions in the history of the film industry. The blacklist was a product of the anti-communist paranoia that swept through the United States in the post-World War II years. Individuals in Hollywood who were suspected of having communist ties or sympathies were either blacklisted, meaning they were barred from working in the industry, or forced to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee, UAC. The consequences were severe. Careers were ruined, lives were disrupted, and the artistic freedom that Hollywood was known for was compromised by the political climate of the era. Bond, whose political views were shaped by his conservative background, fully supported the blacklist. He believed that the Hollywood elite, particularly those with leftist or communist leanings, posed a danger to the values he held dear. In his eyes, these individuals were not just ideological opponents, but potential threats to the stability and integrity of the nation. He was a vocal supporter of the HUAC hearings and participated in efforts to name names, which led to the public blacklisting of numerous writers, directors, and actors. For Bond, this was a necessary step to protect the American way of life from what he saw as the subversive influence of communism. Hollywood in the 1950s was a hotbed of political activity, with many filmmakers and artists taking sides in the ideological struggle between democracy and communism. While some in the industry resisted the blacklist, arguing that it was an infringement on personal freedoms and artistic expression, others like Bond embraced it as a means of defending American principles. The climate was tense, and the pressure to conform to certain political ideals was immense. As a prominent actor with strong political convictions, Bond's support for the blacklist was seen as a natural extension of his public persona as a patriot and staunch defender of American values. The impact of the McCarthy era and the Hollywood blacklist reverberated through the entertainment industry for years. Careers were derailed, and many talented individuals found themselves unable to work in their chosen profession. While Bond's own career remained largely unaffected by the political turmoil, the consequences of the blacklist were far-reaching, creating a rift in Hollywood that took decades to heal. The 1950s marked a period of intense cultural and political division in America, and Hollywood was at the heart of that struggle. Bond's involvement in this chapter of Hollywood history speaks to the broader cultural and political climate of the time, where the lines between politics and entertainment were often blurred, and the stakes were high. In the end, Ward Bond's political views, particularly his support for the Hollywood blacklist, reflect a complex period in American history. While many of his actions were driven by a genuine desire to protect what he believed was the American way of life, they also contributed to one of the most divisive chapters in Hollywood's history. Bond, like many of his contemporaries, found himself on the side of the ideological battle, fighting against what he perceived as a threat to his country's values. This era, marked by suspicion and fear, left a lasting impact on Hollywood and shaped the careers of countless artists and filmmakers for years to come. Ward Bond's unexpected death in 1960 sent shockwaves through Hollywood, leaving a void in the industry that would be felt for years to come. On November 5, 1960, at the age of 57, Bond suffered a fatal heart attack while staying at a hotel in Dallas, Texas. His passing was sudden, and the news spread quickly across the entertainment world. At the time of his death, Bond was still an active and beloved figure, deeply embedded in both the film and television industries. His death marked the loss of one of Hollywood's most reliable and well-respected character actors. At the time of his passing, Bond was in the midst of a successful run on the popular NBC television series Wagon Train. His portrayal of Major Seth Adams had become one of the defining roles of his career, and the series was a major hit with audiences. Wagon Train was more than just a television show. It was a piece of Americana that captured the spirit of the West, and Bond's performance was a key element in its success. His role as the stoic, dependable leader of the wagon train provided the perfect balance to the more chaotic, action-filled moments of the show. When Bond passed away, the wagon train cast and crew were left in mourning, and the producers had to make the difficult decision to continue the series without its central figure. Bond's absence was deeply felt, both on screen and behind the scenes, as his character had been a cornerstone of the show's dynamic. The series carried on, but it was never quite the same without the presence of Bond's steady leadership. Despite his untimely death, Ward Bond's legacy continued to grow and evolve in the years that followed. His work in both film and television had left a lasting imprint on the entertainment industry, and his influence, particularly on Western cinema, was undeniable. Bond had played a pivotal role in shaping the genre, bringing his signature authenticity and rugged presence to numerous films that have since become classics. His performances in films like The Searchers, Rio Bravo, and It's a Wonderful Life were central to the success of those projects, and his impact on the genre was undeniable. Even after his death, his contributions to the Western genre continued to resonate with audiences, and he remained a cherished figure in the history of American cinema. In recognition of his achievements, Bond was posthumously honored in the years following his death. In 1960, just before his passing, he was awarded a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, an enduring tribute to his contributions to the entertainment industry. This star, located at 6933 Hollywood Boulevard, symbolizes his lasting place in the history of Hollywood and stands as a testament to his impact on the industry. The recognition was a fitting acknowledgement of his prolific career and the mark he had left on the world of film and television. Further solidifying his legacy, Bond was inducted into the Western Performers Hall of Fame in 2001, nearly 4 decades after his death. This honor was reserved for those who had made a significant contribution to the Western genre, and it was a fitting recognition of Bond's immense influence on the films and television shows that had defined the genre. His portrayal of rugged, morally grounded characters had helped shape the very essence of the Western, and his induction into the Hall of Fame ensured that his contributions to this iconic genre would never be forgotten. Ward Bond's legacy is not just defined by the roles he played, but by the integrity and authenticity he brought to those characters. In a time when Hollywood was filled with flashy stars and glamorous figures, Bond stood apart as a man whose strength and reliability were both on-screen and off. He was a constant, a reliable presence in the ever-changing landscape of Hollywood, and his untimely death left a gap that could never be filled. Yet, through his lasting influence on Western cinema, his roles in some of the most beloved films in American history, and the posthumous recognition of his contributions, Bond's legacy lives on. As Hollywood continues to evolve, the impact of Ward Bond's work remains a touchstone for those who appreciate the great tradition of American cinema, particularly in the Western genre. His death may have been sudden, but his contributions to the world of entertainment are timeless, ensuring that his place in the pantheon of Hollywood legends is secure. Even after Ward Bond's untimely passing, his deep and enduring friendship with John Wayne continued to resonate in ways that transcended death. The bond between these two men, forged in the early days of their careers, was one that went beyond Hollywood camaraderie. It was a true friendship that survived the challenges of fame, personal differences, and the inevitable passage of time. When Bond passed away in 1960, it was not only a devastating loss for his family and fans, but also for John Wayne, who had lost one of his closest friends. Wayne's tribute to Bond at his funeral was a reflection of the strength and depth of their relationship. Standing before the mourners, Wayne delivered an emotional eulogy, honoring his dear friend and acknowledging the profound impact Bond had on his life. His words were filled with both sadness and admiration, as he spoke about the loyalty and steadfastness that Bond had shown throughout their friendship. Wayne's eulogy wasn't just a public speech, it was a heartfelt expression of grief from a man who had lost someone he truly respected. To Wayne, Bond was not just a fellow actor, but a brother, someone who had stood by him through the highs and lows of their careers and personal lives. In the years that followed, Wayne would continue to honor Bond's memory in his own quiet way. One of the most symbolic gestures came in the form of a personal bequest. Wayne left Bond's widow a shotgun, a small but significant reminder of their enduring friendship. This wasn't just any shotgun, it was the same one that Wayne had accidentally fired during a hunting trip years earlier, injuring Bond in the process. The gun, which had been a symbol of a shared, albeit painful experience, became a token of the deep affection and respect Wayne had for his friend. The bequest was a perfect example of the kind of humor and affection that characterized their friendship. Even in the face of tragedy, Wayne found a way to honor their bond in a deeply personal and meaningful way. The nature of Wayne and Bond's friendship was such that it defied the usual Hollywood norms. It wasn't built on shared screen time or mutual career aspirations alone. It was founded on years of shared experiences, mutual respect, and a deep sense of loyalty. Theirs was a bond that didn't depend on external validation or the shifting tides of Hollywood's ever-changing landscape. Even as their careers evolved and the world around them changed, their friendship remained constant. They had shared countless hours on set, endured long shoots together, and navigated the ups and downs of fame, all while building a friendship that became one of the most enduring in the history of Hollywood. The strength of their bond wasn't defined by their public personas or the roles they played on screen. It was a relationship that grew out of their personal lives, built on shared values and a mutual understanding of each other's strengths and weaknesses. Their friendship had seen its fair share of challenges, including the difficult periods when Wayne's temperament could be difficult to manage. Yet, despite those moments of tension, their loyalty to one another remained unshaken. Both men understood the complexities of each other's character, and it was this understanding that ultimately made their friendship so enduring. Even in death, Ward Bond's friendship with John Wayne continued to inspire and shape Wayne's thoughts. He often spoke of Bond fondly, recalling the times they had shared together and the deep connection they had formed. In many ways, the friendship was a living testament to the enduring power of loyalty and respect, qualities that were sometimes lost in the glamour and fleeting nature of Hollywood fame. The two men may have worked in an industry known for its transience, but their bond stood the test of time. In the end, the relationship between Wayne and Bond transcended the superficial aspects of Hollywood's often fickle world. Their friendship was not contingent on career success or public approval. It was rooted in something far deeper, a sense of mutual respect and an unwavering loyalty that defied the typical Hollywood narrative. Through all the changes in their lives, both personal and professional, their bond remained a constant, one that neither time nor death could diminish. Ward Bond's life and career embody the complexities of Hollywood's golden age. His journey was one of contrasts, a man known for his tough, stoic roles on screen, yet whose off-screen life was marked by deep friendships and personal challenges. Through his iconic partnership with John Wayne, Bond's legacy goes beyond just his performances. It speaks to the enduring power of loyalty, resilience, and mutual respect. His life wasn't without its struggles, but those very struggles shaped him into a man who valued integrity.
For years in Hollywood, when anybody was doing a movie and they needed a villain or a bad guy, somebody who was really despicable, they'd say, why don't you go out and get Lee Van Cleef? He's probably played more villains than any other person in motion pictures.
Lee Van Cleef despised him more than anyone. This wasn't just a rivalry, it was a full-blown feud, a clash that would echo through Hollywood's golden era. But why? What fueled this intense animosity between Van Cleef and John Wayne? In this video, we'll unravel that story, exploring the legacy of a man who became the definitive villain of Westerns, and the unique path that led him there. From early struggles in Hollywood to his rise as a leading actor, Van Cleef's journey was anything but ordinary. Along the way, we'll dive into the legendary feud with John Wayne, uncovering the personal and professional tensions that marked their relationship. We'll also look at Van Cleef's family life, his health battles, and his impact on the Western genre. Born on January 9, 1925, in Somerville, New Jersey, Lee Van Cleef's disciplined upbringing and the influence of his father, a watchmaker, played a significant role in shaping the actor's precise and meticulous approach to his craft. Lee Van Cleef was born on January 9, 1925, in Somerville, New Jersey, a small town where values like hard work and discipline ran deep. His early years shaped his approach to life, and it was his father, a watchmaker, who imparted the importance of precision and careful attention to detail. It wasn't just about fixing watches for Van Cleef's father. It was about mastering something with dedication, and that lesson stayed with Lee for the rest of his life. His father's influence created in him a sense of focus and discipline that would later define his acting career, where every movement, every gesture was carefully considered. As a young man, Van Cleef didn't immediately head to Hollywood. Instead, like many of his generation, he answered the call to serve during World War II. He enlisted in the U.S. Navy, where he worked as a radio operator. His time in the military wasn't just a chapter in his life, it was a transformative experience that shaped much of the characters he would later portray. The hardships of war hardened him, giving him an edge that would become a signature part of his on-screen persona. This sense of toughness, the no-nonsense attitude, and the quiet, steely resolve would become hallmarks of his acting style, especially in the westerns and action films he would come to be known for. After the war, Van Cleef returned home and made a decision that would alter the course of his life. He attended the University of South Carolina, with plans to pursue a degree in engineering. However, a different path called to him. The world of acting, with its lights, cameras, and drama, beckoned, and despite the practicality of engineering, Van Cleef made the bold choice to follow his passion. He left his studies behind and set his sights on Hollywood. Arriving in Tinseltown, Van Cleef's journey was not one of immediate success. He started in small, uncredited roles, often playing military men or cowboys, but he was just a face in the crowd. His early performances didn't stand out, but they laid the foundation for the man he would become. Despite facing these early setbacks, the rugged look that had served him well in the Navy and the discipline he'd learned from his father were starting to set him apart. Still, Hollywood wasn't ready to fully embrace him yet. When Lee Van Cleef first arrived in Hollywood, the road ahead was anything but glamorous. He wasn't immediately cast in lead roles or high-profile projects. Instead, he began his career by taking on small, often uncredited parts in films and television shows. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was work. For a while, he was the face that audiences would recognize in brief moments on screen, playing minor characters that didn't leave much of an impression. His first notable role came in High Noon, 1952, where he played a silent, menacing henchman. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and it showcased the sharp, cold intensity in his demeanor that would later define his career. Despite this small role, Van Cleef soon found himself relegated to a particular type of character. He was cast as military personnel, cowboys, or henchmen, always the secondary figure, never the hero. Hollywood didn't quite know what to do with him. He had the look of a man who could play the villain, but it seemed like that's all he was ever going to be. His sharp features, piercing eyes, and angular face made him perfect for these tough, often villainous roles. But as his early career progressed, he found himself boxed in by these types. Van Cleef was frustrated. He wanted more than just to be the guy who got the bad guy or played a cold-hearted outlaw. His struggle with typecasting was compounded by personal challenges. Just as his career was beginning to take shape, a car accident in the mid-1950s nearly derailed everything. The accident left him with serious injuries that required significant recovery time. For a man who had built a reputation on playing tough, rugged characters, this was a devastating setback. It wasn't just the physical toll of the accident. The incident also placed a temporary halt to his career. For a while, it seemed like Van Cleef might be forgotten, another actor lost to the ebb and flow of Hollywood's relentless demand for fresh faces. But Van Cleef wasn't the kind to give up easily. He wasn't about to let a car accident or the constant struggle to break free from the typecasting that plagued him end his career. Despite the setbacks, he pressed on, continuing to take whatever roles he could. But no matter how many parts he played, he couldn't seem to shake the label of villain. This frustration would stick with him for years, as he watched other actors around him land lead roles and gain fame, while he remained stuck in the shadow of Hollywood's expectations. His career was stagnating, and it seemed like the dream he had worked so hard to achieve was slipping further away. In the midst of these personal and professional struggles, Van Cleef had to face the fact that if he wanted a chance to break out, he would have to fight for it. He began refining his craft, working harder to perfect his characters and bring more depth to the roles he was offered. But no matter how much he prepared, the industry wasn't giving him much to work with. The frustration mounted, and for a time, it seemed like his path to fame would remain out of reach. It was a tough period, full of uncertainty, but it would eventually lead to something much bigger, a turning point that would set the stage for his eventual rise as one of Hollywood's most iconic actors in the Western genre. In 1965, Lee Van Cleef's career took a dramatic turn. For years, he had struggled to escape the shadow of typecasting, but it was the visionary director Sergio Leone who would finally help him break free. It all began with For a Few Dollars More, 1965, where Van Cleef was cast as a cunning and ruthless outlaw named Colonel Douglas Mortimer. The role was a significant step forward in his career, but it was his next project with Leone, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, 1966, that truly solidified his place in cinematic history. In The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Van Cleef portrayed Angel Eyes, a cold-blooded bounty hunter who would become one of the most iconic villains in film history. What made this role so special was the depth and complexity that Van Cleef brought to the character. Unlike the one-dimensional villains of previous years, Angel Eyes was more than just a ruthless killer. He had his own code, his own sense of morality, one that was detached from the law and society's expectations. The character's calm demeanor, mixed with an underlying menace, created a presence on screen that was chilling and captivating. It was a performance that showcased Van Cleef's ability to take what could have been a simple antagonist and turn him into something far more complex. This role was the catalyst for Van Cleef's rise to fame, but it wasn't just luck or timing. His ability to embody these morally ambiguous characters in a way that felt both authentic and compelling helped redefine the way villains were portrayed in Westerns. Van Cleef's portrayal of Angel Eyes didn't just make him a star, it set a new standard for the Western genre. His character wasn't just evil for the sake of it. He was driven by a personal code, and that added a layer of intrigue that had been lacking in previous Western villains. Following the success of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Van Cleef's career continued to soar. He starred in another of Leone's films, For a Few Dollars More, as Colonel Mortimer, a man with a mysterious past who seeks justice in his own way. Mortimer's character was a far cry from the stereotypical all-good hero of many Westerns. Instead, he was a man with flaws and complexities, driven by vengeance, yet holding on to a sense of honor. Van Cleef excelled at playing these layered characters, and audiences quickly took notice. They weren't just villains. They were men caught in their own moral dilemmas, grappling with their personal codes in a lawless world. Van Cleef's transformation from a typecast villain to a respected leading man was a testament to his skill and versatility. He had the ability to make his characters stand out, even when they were on the wrong side of the law. It was this ability to inject humanity into these flawed, complex characters that turned him into one of the most memorable figures in Western cinema. His work in the spaghetti westerns, films that pushed the boundaries of the genre, cemented his place in film history as a master of portraying the morally complex yet unforgettable anti-hero. Lee Van Cleef quickly became synonymous with the Western genre, not just as a character actor, but as an icon in his own right. His intense performances, coupled with his striking, rugged appearance, made him a natural fit for roles that demanded menace and complexity. With his sharp features, piercing eyes, and stoic demeanor, Van Cleef had the perfect look for a villain. But it wasn't just his appearance that made him memorable. It was his ability to bring depth to his characters, transforming them from one-dimensional antagonists into figures that audiences couldn't forget. In the world of Westerns, villains often had one job: to be the bad guy. But Van Cleef changed that. He redefined what it meant to be a villain. His characters weren't just evil for the sake of it. They were complex, driven by personal codes and motivations that made them more than mere obstacles for the heroes to overcome. His portrayal of Angel Eyes in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was a prime example of this. While he was undoubtedly the antagonist, Van Cleef's performance elevated him beyond the usual villain. He made Angel Eyes a character with layers, someone who had his own moral code, however warped it may have been. This was a shift in the genre, one that gave more depth to the antagonist and helped reshape the entire landscape of Western films. The success of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly had a profound impact on Western cinema. Van Cleef's portrayal of the cold, calculating bounty hunter was one of the standout performances in the film, and it became a defining moment in his career. It wasn't just his looks or his ability to intimidate, it was the subtlety in his performance that made him so memorable. His intense gaze, his ability to convey menace without saying much, and his calm, controlled demeanor made him one of the most iconic figures in Western cinema. He didn't need to speak loudly to be heard. His presence alone was enough to make an impact, and that left audiences captivated. Van Cleef's influence extended far beyond The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. In The Big Gun Down, 1966, he played a bounty hunter chasing down a dangerous criminal. And once again, his character was defined by the internal conflict and personal code that drove him. This film solidified Van Cleef's reputation as one of the most reliable actors in the Western genre, capable of bringing depth to even the most morally ambiguous roles. His portrayal of men who walked the fine line between good and evil helped establish a new kind of anti-hero in Westerns, one who wasn't entirely virtuous, but still had a sense of honor. This shift in character development was something that set him apart from his contemporaries. In Death Rides, A Horse, 1967, Van Cleef's character was yet another example of the layered, morally complex figures he portrayed so well. In this film, he played an aging gunslinger seeking revenge for the murder of his family. What made his character stand out wasn't just his quest for vengeance, it was the depth of emotion behind it. Van Cleef's portrayal of a man who had lived through years of hardship and loss added a tragic dimension to the film. He wasn't just a cold-blooded killer. He was a man scarred by his past, trying to reconcile the man he had become with the person he once was. This depth of character helped Van Cleef become a staple in the Western genre, particularly in films that explored the more complex, morally gray areas of the Wild West. In A Minute to Pray, A Second to Die, 1968, Van Cleef again took on the role of a man trapped between two worlds, one in which he had to confront his past sins, and one where he had to navigate the dangerous world of criminals and lawmen. The film added yet another layer to his already impressive range as an actor, showcasing his ability to play characters that were both hardened and vulnerable, ruthless yet searching for redemption. It was in these films that Van Cleef truly solidified his place as a Western legend, transitioning from supporting roles to leading man status. He wasn't just a villain anymore. He was the central figure, the man audiences wanted to see, whether he was playing a gunslinger, an outlaw, or a lawman. Van Cleef's career trajectory was a testament to his skill as an actor. While he had started out in smaller, often uncredited roles, by the late 1960s, he had become one of the most respected figures in the Western genre. His transition from supporting roles to leading man was a crucial turning point, and it was through films like For a Few Dollars More, Death Rides a Horse, and A Minute to Pray, A Second to Die that Van Cleef truly became a household name in the Western world. What set him apart from his peers was his ability to play a range of complex characters, each one more nuanced than the last. He wasn't just a typical hero or villain. He was something in between, a character defined by his personal codes and struggles rather than simple morality. In the years following his rise to fame, Van Cleef continued to be a dominant force in Western cinema. His performances in these films not only helped to elevate his own career, but also had a lasting impact on the genre itself. By portraying villains who weren't just bad for the sake of being bad, he helped redefine the way Westerns were made and how characters were written. His legacy in Western cinema is undeniable, and he remains one of the most influential figures in the genre. A man whose intense presence and complex portrayals of morally ambiguous characters reshaped the Western and elevated it to new heights. As the 1970s and 1980s arrived, Lee Van Cleef began to expand his horizons, moving beyond the Western genre that had defined his early career. With his established presence and undeniable talent, he was ready to tackle new challenges and reach new audiences. The action film boom of the 1980s offered him the perfect opportunity to reinvent himself, and he didn't hesitate to seize it. One of Van Cleef's most notable roles during this period was in Escape from New York, 1981, a film that became a cult classic. Directed by John Carpenter, the film starred Kurt Russell as Snake Plissken, but Van Cleef's portrayal of the ruthless, menacing officer who works behind the scenes was unforgettable. His commanding presence and sharp delivery made him a perfect fit for this action-packed dystopian world. Van Cleef's ability to play menacing, no-nonsense characters translated seamlessly from Westerns to the world of action films, where he could still embody the hard-edged, tough guy persona audiences had come to expect from him. In The Octagon, 1980, Van Cleef once again embraced the role of a tough, commanding character. This time, he starred alongside martial arts icon Chuck Norris in a film that blended action with elements of the martial arts genre. Van Cleef's character, a man caught in a web of dangerous intrigue, was just as cold and calculating as the villains he portrayed in his westerns, but with a contemporary, high-stakes twist. These roles marked a shift in his career, allowing him to tap into a new genre and continue his relevance in Hollywood. What made Van Cleef's transition into action films so successful was his ability to adapt. While many actors from the 1960s and 1970s struggled to stay relevant as tastes in cinema shifted, Van Cleef was able to seamlessly move into new genres without losing his distinctive style. Whether in gritty action films or high-octane thrillers, he brought the same level of intensity and menace to his roles, earning him new fans and solidifying his place as one of the most versatile actors of his era. He proved that, despite the changing landscape of Hollywood, he still had the chops to captivate audiences and deliver memorable performances. But Van Cleef's talents weren't confined to the silver screen. In the 1980s, he also made a successful foray into television, further expanding his career and solidifying his place as a beloved figure in popular culture. One of his most notable television roles was in The Master, 1984, a martial arts-themed series in which he starred alongside Timothy Van Patten. Van Cleef's character, a skilled martial artist and tough-as-nails hero, marked another transformation in his career. The show allowed him to once again showcase his ability to portray hard-edged, commanding figures. But it also highlighted a new side of his talent, his ability to adapt to the small screen. The Master ran for a single season, but it left a lasting impact on fans, especially those who had followed his career through westerns and action films. The role showed that Van Cleef wasn't just a Western icon, he was a versatile actor capable of thriving in different mediums. His transition to television was not only a testament to his acting range, but also a reflection of his ability to stay relevant in an ever-changing entertainment landscape. These television roles, along with his continued success in action films, helped to solidify Van Cleef's lasting fame. Even as his big-screen roles began to taper off, his presence on television kept him in the public eye, ensuring that his legacy would live on. Van Cleef's career wasn't just about the films he made, it was about his ability to reinvent himself, to continue adapting to new trends in entertainment, and to always bring his signature intensity to whatever role he played. From westerns to action films to television, Lee Van Cleef's versatility was a key factor in his long-lasting success in Hollywood. In many ways, his later career marked the culmination of decades of hard work, proving that he was more than just a one-trick pony. He had successfully navigated the evolution of Hollywood and continued to leave his mark, not just as a Western star, but as a dynamic force in multiple genres. His ability to thrive in both the action film and television worlds ensured that his place in the pantheon of Hollywood legends would never be in doubt. Lee Van Cleef's personal life was as complex as the characters he portrayed on screen. Behind the tough exterior and intense performances, Van Cleef was also a family man, facing the same challenges many working actors face when balancing personal and professional lives. In 1943, at the age of 18, Van Cleef married Patty Ruth Cale, and together they had 3 children, David, Alan, and Deborah. For the next 15 years, Van Cleef's career as an actor began to take off, but so did the demands of his work. Hollywood's grind and constant travel made it difficult to maintain a stable family life. Despite the shared joys of raising their children, the pressures of the industry took their toll. And in 1958, after 15 years of marriage, the couple divorced. The divorce marked a significant turning point in Van Cleef's life, both personally and professionally. At this stage, his career was facing some struggles, and the split added to the emotional weight of the time. Though his star was beginning to rise, particularly after his breakout roles in the 1960s, the personal toll of his failed marriage lingered. Yet, as is often the case with Van Cleef's own characters, he proved to be resilient, and soon he would find the support he needed to elevate both his personal life and his career. In 1960, just 2 years after his divorce, Van Cleef married Joan Marguerite Doctorow. This new chapter in his life coincided with one of the most important periods in his career. The early 1960s were when Van Cleef's reputation was beginning to grow, and Joan was a steadfast partner during his rise to fame. While Van Cleef was transforming from a character actor to a leading man, Joan played a crucial role in supporting him through this transitional period. Her encouragement and stability were key factors as he took on the defining roles in Sergio Leone's spaghetti westerns, a career-defining move that would see him become one of the most recognizable faces in Western cinema. Joan's support was invaluable as Van Cleef faced the ups and downs of the industry, navigating the challenges of fame while striving for greater roles. Their marriage, though full of shared successes, would also face its challenges. After 14 years together, the couple divorced in 1974. While it marked the end of another significant personal relationship for Van Cleef, it also allowed him the opportunity to move forward, both in his personal life and his career. This period of his life proved once again that, like the tough, weathered characters he portrayed, Van Cleef could endure hardship and reinvent himself in the face of adversity. His third marriage, to Barbara Havalone in 1976, would bring him much-needed stability. By this time, Van Cleef was entering his later years, and his health was starting to decline. Barbara, however, was a constant source of support. Together, they weathered the challenges that come with aging, and Barbara stood by his side as his health issues began to affect his ability to continue working at the pace he once had. Through heart problems and complications from past injuries, Barbara's unwavering presence was a key factor in Van Cleef's ability to cope with the physical toll of his long career. In his later years, Van Cleef's career began to slow down as the industry shifted. His health issues were mounting, but Barbara's support gave him the stability he needed to handle the inevitable decline that comes with aging. Though he wasn't as active in films or television as he had been in his prime, his legacy as one of the greats of Western cinema remained intact. Barbara remained by his side until his death, and their marriage of 13 years provided him with a sense of peace and personal fulfillment in his final years. Van Cleef's personal life, though marked by divorces and the struggles of balancing a high-profile career with family commitments, also showed his resilience. Each chapter in his personal life brought new challenges, but also new opportunities for growth. His third marriage to Barbara allowed him to live out his final years in relative peace, knowing he had someone who would stand by him no matter what. It was in this sense of stability that Van Cleef could quietly exit the limelight, leaving behind a career that had defined an era of cinema and an indelible mark on Hollywood history. Van Cleef's family life and relationships remind us that, much like his iconic roles, he was a man of complexity, navigating personal struggles and triumphs in much the same way he navigated the morally gray worlds of his characters. His enduring legacy in Hollywood wasn't just shaped by his screen presence, but also by the quiet strength he exhibited in his personal life, especially in the final years when he found peace with Barbara and the family he had built. Lee Van Cleef's career wasn't just shaped by his on-screen performances, but also by the personal challenges he faced behind the scenes. Despite his tough guy persona, his life was marked by physical struggles and health issues that would alter the course of both his career and personal life. One of the most significant obstacles Van Cleef encountered was a car accident that occurred early in his career. The accident left him with serious injuries that required extensive recovery. For an actor who had made his mark playing tough, rugged characters, this was a difficult setback. The accident didn't just put a halt to his acting schedule, it also tested his resilience. In the midst of the physical and emotional toll, Van Cleef was forced to step back and reassess his future in Hollywood. The accident became a reminder that even the most hardened characters on screen could face vulnerability in real life, and it underscored the deep contrast between his on-screen toughness and the realities of his personal struggles. In addition to the car accident, Van Cleef faced a series of health problems throughout his life. As he aged, he developed heart issues that gradually became more pronounced. These health complications were a constant challenge, and by the 1970s, they began to affect his ability to perform at the level he once did. Despite these setbacks, Van Cleef continued to work in Hollywood, demonstrating the same determination and tenacity that had made him a star in the first place. But as the years wore on, the toll on his body became more evident, and his presence on screen began to diminish as he struggled with his health. However, the most symbolic of his personal challenges came in a far more intimate and deeply human moment: the loss of part of his finger. While building a playhouse for his daughter, Deborah, Van Cleef suffered a serious injury, losing the last joint of his right-hand middle finger. For many, this would have been a career-ending injury, especially for an actor whose persona was built on physical toughness. But Van Cleef didn't let this injury derail his career. He continued acting, but the loss of his finger became an undeniable symbol of the dual nature of his life. To the public, he was the tough, cold-blooded bounty hunter, the villain with the sharp, calculating edge. But in his private life, he was a devoted father, willing to sacrifice his own well-being for the happiness of his children. The Playhouse incident not only revealed his vulnerability, but also his devotion to his family. He was, after all, just as much a father as he was a legendary actor, and that sacrifice spoke volumes about the man behind the camera. The injury to his finger also became a part of his public persona, though not in a way that hindered his career. Rather, it added to the aura of the tough guy image he had so carefully crafted. The fact that he could continue to work despite this injury showcased his strength and determination. He wasn't just playing hard men on screen, he embodied that same resilience in his real life. It became a quiet testament to his ability to endure, to push through pain, and to remain steadfast in the face of adversity. For those who knew him, the loss of his finger was a reminder of the personal sacrifices he made, not just for his career, but for his family as well. Van Cleef's physical struggles were a constant presence throughout his life, and they were part of the reason his performances had such a raw, authentic quality. When you watched him play a character, whether a villain or an anti-hero, you could feel that his toughness wasn't just an act, it was part of who he was. The challenges he faced off-screen only served to deepen his portrayal of the men he played. His vulnerability, however, was often hidden behind a tough exterior, making it all the more powerful when it did emerge. It wasn't just his acting that made him so memorable. It was the way he channeled his personal experiences and struggles into his characters, making them feel both real and relatable. In the end, Lee Van Cleef's health issues and the personal challenges he faced didn't define him. What defined him was his ability to continue working through adversity, his unwavering commitment to his craft, and the way he balanced his on-screen toughness with his devotion to his family. The loss of his finger, the car accident, and the heart problems all became part of the fabric of who Van Cleef was, a man who faced difficulties with the same determination he brought to his roles, never allowing them to stop him from pursuing his passion. These struggles didn't break him. They only added depth to the legendary figure who left an indelible mark on Hollywood. Lee Van Cleef's disdain for John Wayne wasn't just a product of Hollywood competition. It went far deeper. What started as a professional rivalry quickly became a personal feud that shaped much of Van Cleef's career and legacy. While both men were legends in their own right, their contrasting approaches to acting, their political beliefs, and their differing views on what the American West represented set them on a collision course that would last throughout their careers. One of the most significant differences between the two was their approach to acting. Van Cleef was a method actor, known for diving deeply into the psychology of his characters. He believed in understanding every nuance, every flaw of the role he was playing. His characters were often complex, layered, and morally ambiguous, reflecting the gray areas of human nature. In contrast, John Wayne's acting style was rooted in a more traditional, one-dimensional approach. He often portrayed the archetypal cowboy, the brave, stoic hero with unwavering principles. To Van Cleef, this reliance on a single persona was a sign of complacency. He felt that Wayne's success wasn't a result of raw talent, but of a carefully constructed image that resonated with audiences. In essence, Van Cleef believed that Wayne's appeal was more about image and less about the depth and range that he himself brought to the screen. This fundamental difference in acting style was just the surface of their rivalry. Underneath, their political and ideological beliefs also played a crucial role in the tension between them. John Wayne was a staunch conservative, known for his vocal support of traditional American values and his unyielding patriotism. He was an outspoken defender of the Vietnam War and the American way of life, advocating for the ideals of rugged individualism and military strength. Van Cleef, on the other hand, was more aligned with progressive ideals. He embraced the counterculture movement of the 1960s, rejecting the notion of blind nationalism and the glorification of militarism. While Van Cleef never made his political views as public as Wayne, it was clear that he leaned toward a more nuanced, critical view of American exceptionalism. This ideological divide between the two men created a bitter undercurrent in their interactions, with each viewing the other's worldview as outdated or misguided. Beyond their ideological differences, the two actors also found themselves in competition for dominance within the Western genre. John Wayne was the quintessential hero of traditional American Westerns, embodying the ideals of the Old West, with his clear-cut portrayal of good versus evil. Wayne's films often followed a simple formula: the strong, silent man who upholds justice in a world that rewards strength and honor. Van Cleef, however, became famous for portraying characters who were more complicated, more morally gray. His roles were often those of outlaws or anti-heroes, characters who didn't fit neatly into the box of right or wrong. Where Wayne represented the old guard of the American Western, Van Cleef's characters were more reflective of the complexities of the modern world. Excelled in villainous roles, but lacked the charisma and stature to become a leading man in Hollywood. Van Cleef, in turn, viewed Wayne as a symbol of everything he despised about the traditional Hollywood system, a system that prioritized image and box office appeal over the depth and complexity that he himself brought to his roles. At the heart of their feud was a fundamental clash of values. Van Cleef saw Wayne as a representation of the sanitized, idealized version of the American West, one where the good guys always won and the bad guys were clearly defined. For Van Cleef, this portrayal was not only unrealistic, but it also ignored the moral complexities and the darker aspects of the real world. He believed that the American West wasn't simply a place of good versus evil. It was a place where survival often depended on navigating the gray areas between right and wrong. To him, Wayne's portrayal of the cowboy hero as the unflinching moral center of the frontier was a distorted, simplistic view that ignored the complexities of history. While their feud never became a public spectacle in the way some Hollywood rivalries do, It simmered beneath the surface for years, affecting both men's careers and personal lives. They were both legends of the Western genre, but their rivalry highlighted the deeper divisions in Hollywood at the time. Divisions between old-school stars like Wayne, who represented traditional values, and a new wave of actors like Van Cleef, who sought to bring more complexity and realism to their roles. Ultimately, their relationship was a battle not just for dominance in the Western genre, but for the soul of the American cinema that both men helped to shape. In the end, John Wayne and Lee Van Cleef were both icons, but their rivalry has become a defining part of their legacy. While Wayne's image as the noble cowboy hero remains etched in the minds of audiences, Van Cleef's portrayal of the morally ambiguous, complex anti-hero has left an equally significant mark on the genre. Their feud, born out of differing beliefs about the American West and how it should be portrayed, was as much a clash of ideologies as it was a personal rivalry. And it's a rivalry that continues to fascinate film fans and historians alike. In the 1980s, Lee Van Cleef's presence in Hollywood began to fade as the industry shifted. As his health started to decline, his appearances became less frequent. While he had carved out a legendary place in cinema history, the physical toll of years of acting, coupled with health issues, gradually led him to step away from the spotlight. By this time, Van Cleef had already cemented his legacy as one of the most iconic figures in the Western genre. Yet, as the 1980s wore on, his roles became fewer, and he focused more on his personal life, dealing with the heart problems that had plagued him for years. Despite his declining health, Van Cleef's reputation remained strong. He was, and would always be, a legend in the world of westerns and action films. Sadly, Van Cleef passed away on December 16, 1989, at the age of 64, due to a heart attack. His death marked the end of an era for the Western genre, as he was one of the last of a generation of actors who had helped define the classic style of the genre. His passing left a void in Hollywood, but his contributions to the film world continue to be celebrated to this day. Though his time in the limelight had slowed down in his later years, the mark he left on cinema was undeniable. Van Cleef's legacy is not just in the roles he played, but in the way he shaped the portrayal of villains and anti-heroes in Western films. Before his influence, villains in Westerns were often one-dimensional and lacked depth. Van Cleef brought a new level of complexity to these roles, turning antagonists into characters who could be both feared and understood. His performances in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and For a Few Dollars More, raised the bar for what it meant to play a villain. Rather than simply being evil for evil's sake, his characters often followed their own moral codes, which made them more intriguing and multifaceted. They weren't just obstacles for the hero to overcome. They were fully realized, sometimes tragic characters with motivations and personal struggles that made them more human. Van Cleef's impact on spaghetti westerns is particularly profound. He helped redefine the genre, which had become known for its darker, grittier take on the American West. In contrast to the traditional heroic portrayals of westerns seen in Hollywood, the spaghetti westerns, led by directors like Sergio Leone, embraced a more morally ambiguous vision. Van Cleef's roles in these films were central to this shift. He wasn't just the villain. He was the man who represented the complexities of the human condition in a world that was anything but black and white. His characters were often driven by personal codes of honor, even when they operated outside the law, giving depth to the genre and resonating with audiences in a way that many other westerns had not. In the years following his death, Van Cleef's contributions to the genre have only grown in stature. Filmmakers and actors alike have recognized his influence, with many drawing inspiration from his performances in their own work. He showed future generations of actors that villains didn't have to be caricatures. They could be as compelling as the heroes and just as complex. His work has inspired not only those who sought to continue the tradition of the Western, but also actors in action films who admired his ability to convey menace with a minimal amount of dialogue. The cold, calculating villains he portrayed in films like Escape from New York and The Octagon have become templates for action antagonists in the decades that followed. More than just an actor, Lee Van Cleef was a master of his craft. His ability to portray characters that were at once menacing and empathetic set him apart in the world of westerns and action films. He redefined the role of the villain, adding layers of complexity that had not been seen before in the genre. His work in spaghetti westerns, particularly in films directed by Sergio Leone, helped bring a fresh, dynamic approach to the genre. Van Cleef's influence is still felt today, as new generations of filmmakers and actors look back at his films for inspiration. Though his time in the spotlight was limited, the imprint of Van Cleef's work remains lasting. His name is synonymous with the Western genre, and his contribution to the portrayal of morally ambiguous characters continues to inspire countless stories, performances, and filmmakers. Whether he was playing a ruthless bounty hunter or an aging gunslinger seeking redemption, Van Cleef brought depth and authenticity to his roles. He remains a definitive figure in cinematic history, and his legacy as one of the greats of Western cinema is secure. Lee Van Cleef's place in cinematic history is undeniable. His career is a testament to the power of perseverance and reinvention, showing that an actor can transcend typecasting and become an icon. Through every role, Van Cleef demonstrated a unique ability to bring depth and complexity to his characters, elevating the villain into something much more than a simple antagonist. He wasn't just a man of action or menace, he was a master of his craft, skillfully crafting performances that resonated with audiences long after the screen went dark. Lee Van Cleef's legacy lives on not only through his unforgettable roles, but also through the bold, challenging performances he brought to life. He wasn't just the villain. He was a true artist who redefined what it meant to play the anti-hero. Now, it's time to revisit his film